Yes, welcome everyone. Welcome on this first Sunday morning in the month of May. My name is Joseph Hepburn, and I'm a member of the church in Ocean Park. We are all members here of Church in Ocean Park, and we are here to welcome you to this unique interfaith community that is dedicated to social justice. Now, you may be wondering if you are welcome here. You are welcome. If you just came in from a protest march, if you aren't able to attend protest marches right now, or are confused as to what to do. You are welcome if you don't have a job, if you never had a job, if you don't want a job, or if you are trying to find a job but you are still not successful. We extend a special invitation to those who are single, married, divorced, cisgender, transgender, gender fluid, whatever the title may be, whether we rich or poor, welcome. We extend a special invitation to those who are just browsing, just woke up, or just got out of jail. We don't care if you are more religious than the Pope or more ceremonial than the new King of England, or haven't been in church since your school days. We extend a special invitation to those who are in the millennial group, the Gen Z group, the Gen X group, the baby boomers, or those who are too old to be even classified. Welcome to the church in Ocean Park. We invite those who are in recovery or still addicted. We invite you if you're having problems, if you're down in the dumps, if you don't like organized religion, or think there is this church is too strange. We offer a special invitation to those in grief, those who are willing to receive a prayer right now, those in trouble, those in difficulty, those who are stressed out by the events of our times. We invite tourist seekers, doubters, bleeding hearts, and you. Welcome to the church in Ocean Park. Now I'm going to read we've been hearing a lot of news today about the land acknowledgement situation and reparations. And so this is our land acknowledgement from Church in Ocean Park. We, the people of the Church in Ocean Park, recognize that our building in Santa Monica, California, sits on stolen land. We, the settlers of this land, honor the Quiche, the Tongva, and the Chumash peoples. We acknowledge the harms of genocide, enslavement, forced assimilation, gender violence, and destruction of sacred sites, the burial of historic truths, and indigenous suffering at the hands of settler colonialism. We acknowledge that our communities and country were built on the backs of people stolen from Africa, placed into bondage, and that and forced into labor as well. We acknowledge that we benefit from that labor that has never been repaid. In acknowledgement, let us now commit ourselves to healing by helping to create a more just and equitable society and world through the struggle of changing how we do things that we see as normal, that support the systems that oppress people. We apologize now for the harm done by so many people by pledging ourselves to be part of the culture of repair. So as we continue to prepare for worship now, let us repeat the Thich Nhat Hanh chant. We sing it 3 times. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now. I have arrived. I am a home in the hill and in the now. I have arrived. I am a home in the hill and in the now. Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks, Chaplain Joseph. I'd like to sing a song now that I really like. It's by a singer-songwriter from Massachusetts named Richard Berman, and it's called People Holding Hands. And holding hands in Walmart doesn't seem especially brave, but I was right behind them, and I saw the cashier's face, the look of shock and anger, and the masking of that glance. So much feeling stirred so quickly by two women holding hands. The world is not in danger of succumbing to a flood, of being overwhelmed by a rising sea of love. Every kind of caring is a blessing on the land. It seems what's needed here is more, not less, of people holding hands. One of these women had had a husband for over 16 years, and she worked hard to see herself as happy as she appeared. But there was a voice that called her from someplace deep inside that told her not to settle, that would not be denied. Her father knows the gospel, he's an elder in his church, and for him his daughter's choice unravels his life's work. You know you're killing your mother, he tells her on the phone, and once again she's made to see there's no more going home. The world is not in danger of succumbing to a flood, of being overwhelmed by a rising sea of love. Every kind of caring is a blessing on the land. It seems what's needed here is more, not less, of people holding hands. I watch these women walking, and I am a bit in awe. They pay no heed to cashiers or others in the store, and I wonder about myself. If I loved another woman, would I walk with her through Walmart? Would I offer her my hand? The world is not in danger of succumbing to a flood, of being overwhelmed by a rising sea of love. Every kind of caring is a blessing on the land. It seems what's needed here is more, not less, of people holding hands. People holding hands.
Morning, everybody. I know some of you have met our new intern, Jeffry, Umaña Muñoz. Let me say something more about him. Jeffry is a current undergraduate student at UCLA and a community advocate. Immigrating to the US with his family from El Salvador, where they settled in San Bernardino. Growing up undocumented and Latin, Jeffrey's work focuses on utilizing the power of his experiences to guide his organizing of marginalized communities towards a greater understanding of equity and justice. You will soon know a lot more about Jeffry because he's speaking this morning about his journey into activism. So take it away, Jeffry. Oh, I'm gonna sort of ask Jeffry a few leading questions, to which he will respond. The first question is this: tell us when and where you were born and how you ended up so far away from your birthplace.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks so much for the invitation to speak today. Super excited to share a little bit more about myself, who I am, my visions for the future, and I think how they coalesce into, why I'm here in the first place, specifically the here being the church in Ocean Park. But to take it back to, I think, well, I'm about to turn 21, so almost 19 years ago when my parents and I emigrated from El Salvador. I was born in El Salvador to both of my parents. Surprisingly enough, unlike I think a lot of the stories that are portrayed in the media, my mom was actually college educated in El Salvador. She had trained to be both a nurse and a teacher. And by the time I was born, was actually practicing. But even that wasn't enough to pull us through, to pull us across. And I think those are stories that sometimes get obfuscated within American media. The fact that even those who quote unquote make it within their own country don't even have the capacity to do so, right? And so there was no other choice but to leave. My dad immigrated a year before us, and it was always with the intention that a year later we would follow. And a year later, my mom and I hopped on a bus from El Salvador all the way to the north end of Mexico. At that point, once we reached the north end of Mexico, my mom and I were separated. My mom walked across the desert to get to me, while I was crossed over the border as someone else's child. I was 2.5 years old. And I think one of my favorite stories, obviously I don't remember anything, but one of my favorite stories from what my mom found out is that when they were separating us, I had a hard time being complacent with the story that I had to tell. They were passing me over as this other person's child, right? Which means that I would have to agree that this person was my mom if asked. But to my mom's dismay, I've always been a little bit too witty, too snappy, and I got that from her. So my mom says that I would push back a lot and say, that's not my mom. My mom's over there. And so the only solution was to knock me out with a bunch of chocolate. And so that was the one way they were able to cross me over, sugar rush, so that I would knock out and not give away the secret that would inevitably, set me back so much. So I think that's just a funny part of the story. My mom's story, I think, is even crazier in the best way possible. As my mom was actually walking over the desert, she was actually caught by Customs and Border Patrol. And she says that almost about a few seconds after she had seen the American flag just billowing over, and she knew she had made it, because I came a week before her. So the week that she was walking the desert, I had already been here. And she said that the only thing that really gave her the strength to keep going was the fact that she knew she had to get to me. For reference, my mom was told she wouldn't have children. And so for me, I was her everything, and part of the reason why we chose to immigrate the way we did rather than her immigrating while she was pregnant is because she was too afraid that she would miscarry on a flight. And so the only thing that kept her going was the fact that she had to get to me. And she says just about 30 seconds after she knows she makes it, they're caught. She faints and she wakes up in a hospital bed. And when she wakes up in a hospital bed, there's no handcuffs, there's no guard. She gets up outside, no one's there. And the doctors and the nurses come in and they just ask her straight up, like, you were planning to cross into the country, right? And my mom says at that point, her body, her mind was so exhausted that the only thing that could come out was the truth. She didn't have it in her anymore to come up with anything else anymore. And she said, yeah. She told them about me, about, why. And the doctor says, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. This nurse is going to go into this closet and grab you a pair of scrubs. You're going to put on this pair of scrubs and you're going to walk out of this hospital pretending you're a nurse. And just like that, she walked out and she was picked up from there. And I still get goosebumps to that day with that story, because I think to me, it's, divine intervention, the universe intervening, whatever it may be. I think a lot of times I like to just think that it's the fact that my mom loved me so much that love literally beats anything. So that's part of the way we got here. I think those are really important stories. I think that's a story that I like to tell a lot, because it's the whole reason why I'm involved in any of this. I'm proud of my mom for everything that she goes through and everything that she went through, and my dad. I mean, my dad a year before had swam across the Rio Grande in Texas, to get us a better life as well. So struggle has always been in our blood, in our system. I mean, even my grandparents back in El Salvador died in the Civil War fighting for a better life, and so it was such a surreal moment, I think, when I got to college and I started questioning all these systems and questioning, that we live and the ways that we live, and seeing how people are struggling and realizing that there's a legacy of struggle within my family. And I wanted to build on that in this country, and not let this country take the fact that, my parents had been warriors, my grandparents had been warriors, and I could be a warrior here as well. So that's a little bit about how we got to the United States. And ever since, we settled here in cozy San Bernardino. I mean, for me, this is home. I race back here. I'm a current undergrad at UCLA, but Friday at around 6 p.m., I race back home as much as I can with that traffic, right? But it is always important for me to get back, because there's a family here waiting for me, but there's also a community here in San Bernardino that needs my support too. So that's a little bit about immigration, how I got here.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Right now, you are very much an activist, and in a way, you've already started answering this question, but I'd like for you to share with us some of the experiences and that you went through earlier in your life that sort of pointed you in the direction of activism. And I want you to tell us something about what your current activism consists of too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so growing up in California, you're a little bit insulated from feeling on the outsides when you're undocumented. In other states like Florida right now, the governor just passed a bill that literally makes it illegal to live as an undocumented immigrant in the state of Florida, right? I mean, people are flocking out of the state. We have friends that have reached out for support, so I do recognize the privilege of living in California, and I will never take that for granted, because as I was growing up, things were changing in California. I mean, for reference, it's actually kind of funny that California is now the state where we look towards for immigrant inclusion, right? I mean, we're not that far off from Proposition 187 that would have completely blocked undocumented immigrants from education, from healthcare, from just basically it's a mirror of the bill that just passed in Florida. It's almost exactly the same bill, but in today's day and age, so it's ironic now that we look at California as this beacon of hope for immigrants, when it wasn't that long ago that, we were being blocked out. But nevertheless, as I was growing up, those things that shift was happening in California. By the time my mom says the early years of my life when we were here, I couldn't have health insurance. But ever since I was 7, I remember going to the dentist. I remember going to the doctor like everybody else. I always had access to free and reduced school lunch. I obviously went to school every day. There was nothing that made me feel overtly not like other students, and it was a good thing and a bad thing. because for a long time I got to feel like everybody else, and then I got to my junior year, and slowly but surely the rug got pulled out from under my feet. I think the very first time I felt ostracized and like I needed to do something was my junior year. I walked into my 5th period English class. And funny enough, by high school, I had become the political sort of know-it-all on campus. The day of Trump's inauguration, I was a freshman and I showed up with face paint that said "Not my president." And, it was just a whole thing for me. So even though I knew that, for all intents and purposes, I wasn't a citizen, I felt part of the fabric of America, and then we walk into 5th period junior year, and God love her. I love my AP English teacher. She did it with the best intentions in mind, but she sits us down and I pull out my vocabulary journal, ready to do what we always do. And she says, "Okay, guys, today we're all going to pre-register to vote." And it was just a bucket of cold water, especially because everyone would always ask me, "Well, Jeffrey, what do you think about this issue? What about this issue?" And I was always the one that could answer on the spot, right? I was always the one that could go on for hours about these issues. My sophomore year, we took the citizenship test in my world history class. I was the only person that got 100% on it, but all of those things I had swallowed, and just hoping that, I wouldn't have to talk about them. And then here I was in my 5th period English class, and I felt like everyone's eyes were on me as to why I wasn't filling out the paper in front of me. And so I sat there and I left it blank. And when they collected it, they asked, "You're not going to fill it out?" And that's when I had to explain, maybe I can talk to you about it later, but even at that point, it's pretty obvious, and it was the one moment that I felt like, oh, I'm not a part of everybody else, and ever since that junior year, it's been a consistent state of exception, a state of difference. My senior year, when all of my friends were talking about being stressed out over the financial aid application for FAFSA, I was sitting on my bed, counting my parents' paycheck stubs, making sure that we'd be able to make it if I decided that, college was the way I wanted to go, which I knew it was, but I remember when I got my award letters, I was literally doing math. That pandemic era, I spent it doing math because I would review my financial aid letters, spend from 8 a.m. when the financial aid office would open at every single one of my colleges. I was on a phone call trying to figure out which one was more affordable, which one could meet my needs. And sort of similar to that, that was another time where I started to feel different. I go to UCLA now. I'm happy to go to UCLA. I love my school. Well, I love the people at my school. My university is a colonial institution in and of itself, but the work that's coming out of my school is amazing. And I had made the decision to want to go to UCLA, or at least make that my dream school my junior year. And my high school best friend, recently we met up, and she told me, Jeffrey, it's so good to see you doing so well at UCLA and watching you be in love with UCLA. And I was like, well, yeah, like, what do you mean? And she responds, I remember, she was like, I knew you for so long. She was like, it was always Harvard for you. The dream was always Harvard. The dream was always the Ivy Leagues. And junior year, she said, something changed and UCLA became your dream. And she says, and I think it's because you wanted to be safe. You wanted to have a choice where you felt you could settle at, because you thought that because of being undocumented, you couldn't reach those other places. I got into Harvard and Yale, luckily, thanks to God, thanks to my family, thanks to everyone. And yeah, I couldn't go. And it was because, in a sense, UCLA became my realistic Ivy. I got full rides to Harvard and Yale. I mean, they were offering me $2,000 every semester in excess money just to come to them, but I couldn't go because I was so afraid of travel restrictions. It was, at that time, even though the Real ID deadline keeps getting pushed, at that time, the Real ID deadline was for the next spring, which means that I would have gotten cut off after my first year. And thankfully in California, like we're talking about, I have a driver's license, but it's an AB60 driver's license, which means that it can't be used for federal identification purposes, only for state purposes, right? And at the time, it was also the middle of COVID. There was all this uncertainty around not just our health and safety, but, what it all meant for the way that we live our life. Then there was also the issue that we were in the middle of a presidential election. And, as much as I thought that Joe Biden was going to be a much more friendly or pro-immigrant president, I didn't know where the chips were going to land, at this point, I think we might have been better off with at least someone who's more clear about their intentions for my community. But, we get what we get. And so, it, in a sense, it was sort of a settlement for me, going to UCLA. Not because I felt like it was like a lower level school, but because I thought that I didn't have the right to follow my dreams, to do what I wanted. And to a certain extent, that's what it was. The only thing that held me back from going was being undocumented, which is funny because it's an identity that I wasn't even born with. And if you think about it, it's an identity that isn't even real. You pull out into outer space, you can't see a border. They're man-made, they're drawn on paper. How is it that the drawings that my sister made aren't taken as seriously as the borders that are drawn? They're the exact same process, And I think that's why I've gotten so involved, because I've seen not just the pain and the suffering that being undocumented, being part of immigrant life causes you, but because I see the logical fallacies in what we've done to these people and my people, and the idea that, borders are real, that illegality, that someone can be illegal. What does that even mean? You hear all these words thrown around and then you stop and pause for 5 seconds and you think, what does it even mean to be illegal? How can we be illegal if we're all born on the same planet Earth? How can legality be a thing when we all recognize that legality was created to serve our own purposes? These structures, these systems that we create, they only work and they only last for so long because we've allowed them to last for so long. Once people start questioning them, the fallacies are super, super clear to see. And you start seeing the weak points in that system and you start exploiting it. And I think that leads me perfectly into a lot of the organizing that I'm doing right now, because I think for most people, it seems like immigration activism and advocacy isn't going anywhere. It's been since 1986 that we haven't had amnesty or a mass pathway to citizenship. And even then, the 1986 amnesty did so with a carrot and stick approach to where, yeah, we'll give everyone in the country legal citizenship now, but that means that every undocumented worker that comes after then is now criminalized for working and for making a life for their battered family, right? And actually, that specific law is around what most of my advocacy is focusing on right now. I'm leading this campaign that's called the Opportunity for All campaign. And it's a campaign at the University of California that seeks to provide professional and educational equity to undocumented students and even international students and refugee students by making sure that all on-campus job opportunities are open to all students, regardless of immigration or international student status. And that's based on the research done by our coalition partners of the UCLA Labor Center and the UCLA School of Law Center for Immigration Law and Policy that found that because of Supreme Court precedent and the way that the 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act was written, the prohibition on hiring undocumented workers actually does not apply to states and state entities like the UC. Supreme Court precedent in California establishes that the UC is actually an arm of the state, which means that all jobs within the UC are state jobs. So students of the UC can and should and are legally allowed to engage in on-campus job opportunities to ensure their retention, their financial security, their family's financial security. Not only that, but that means that after they graduate, they can come back and teach. They can work in those hospitals. They can practice the careers that UC has made them do. I think I'm not being in a moment of honest transparency. I had a tough second year, my last year. I was on academic probation because I would look in the mirror after doing homework and say, what's the point? I'm going to graduate, be undocumented, and never be able to practice. I'm never going to be able to teach a student, never going to be able to support anyone with any of the education that I'm being prepared for. What's the point? I failed the class last year, got a few C's here and there, pulled myself out of academic probation because I realized that I could do more with the degree, even if I could or couldn't work, but also that my parents' struggle and my struggle had to mean something, and I think I've been thinking about something that I want to say at my graduation next year a lot, but, they told me to get papers, so I decided to get my diploma instead, And so I think that's a little bit about what I'm working on and a little bit about the impetus about why I decided to work on it.
Thank you, Jeffrey. My next question has to do with how religion or spirituality has entered into your thinking, and not just thinking, but your as a motivator toward these same goals. And I'd also like for you to tell us something about what your vision of a better future for this country, the world, what would you like to see as a much more just and fair society?
Yeah, of course. I think this is actually a really great question, because honestly, I think it is this internship specifically that has led me to reflect a lot on how spirituality has been always sort of omnipresent within my organizing without me even realizing it. I think growing up, my ideas of spirituality and religion were very rigid. I mean, I'm Latino, so it was, Sunday morning church on the dot. We were at we were at church on Sundays from 8 a.m. We wouldn't leave until the janitor left around 7, and we were there every single Sunday. And it wasn't, like, oh, my parents are going to go serve and I'm going to go sit on the side and just be the pretty little kid. It was, no, Jeffrey, you're 8, so you can definitely help us carry this. You can stand here and help shake hands. You can, my mom was always super adamant about me being, I think, a little grown up is what I tell her. Even now with my little sister, I'm like, Mom, you raise adults. I was like, you never raise children, you always raise adults. And so it was always that idea that, religion was very rigid, was very structured. And also, unfortunately, it was also the fact that I was interacting with ideas of religion and Christianity and spirituality that were very limiting. I'm bisexual myself. And so, growing up with that, it was hard to like mesh together Latin Christianity and queerness, it was extremely hard. And it wasn't even until I got to college that, for all intents and purposes, I got to snap off of my parents' religion, or at least their form of religion, that I was able to even come to terms with my own sexuality, and even outside of that, I was always questioning the church in general. I remember all of high school, there was big fights between my dad and I. I mean, there was Sunday afternoons where we would fully not speak in the car because I decided to click my lips when the pastor said that abortion is wrong, or I decided to stand up and get out when I didn't agree with what was being said, and I was very honest, and my parents were really good friends with our pastor growing up, and so I wouldn't hesitate, I'd be like, you know what, I really don't agree, and I think my mom liked it a little bit more than my dad did. Because when we would be in secret, my mom would be like, you did good. But it was nice to at least start seeing those experiences of like challenging those like structures and those ideas. And to be honest, those were my first experiences with advocacy and activism. And I think a lot of times people think that like advocacy and activism means that you have got to be on the streets marching every single day. But I've learned that resistance really is anything that you make it out to be. Resistance, can you be sharing a meal? This is resistance. This to me is an act of resistance. Sitting on this call to you all, talking about these experiences, talking about my story, educating you all on what undocumented people go through, that is a form of resistance, because the system tells me that I should shut up, that I should be silent, that no one should know my secret, that you all should not even care to understand it, and that we should just gloss over all of these things, pretend like they don't exist, and move forward. I don't resonate with that. And so for us to even talk about it, even the sharing of a story is resistance enough. Even I tell my parents all the time, my dad is a really big like workaholic, because that's what the system has made him out to be. They've made him out to be nothing but labor. He thinks that everything that he has to do, that the only way that he can accumulate value for himself is by working. It's funny because on holidays, on 3-day holidays, he finally has a job where he gets them off. And somehow it'll be Monday morning on like Martin Luther King Jr. Day or President's Day, and you hear a hammer somewhere in the house, and I get up and I'm like, what are you doing? Why aren't you in bed sleeping? And he's like, no, I don't feel like I have a purpose if I don't work, if I don't labor, if I don't put out something, and so I'd love to be able to teach them that them sitting down and watching TV is resistance too. Because why does everybody else get to do it, but not you? Why does everybody else get to enjoy life the way that you do, but not yourself? I think to make it a little bit more salient to my own personal experiences, I was out with some friends in college here at UCLA, and I was texting one of my friends back home, who's also undocumented, and she was like, "Wow, Jeffrey, like, you're really living the life out there." And I was like, "Well, yeah, and then I was like, "Well, what are you up to right now?" She was like, "Working." And she didn't mean it in a way to make me feel any type of way, but I paused, because it was like a slap of reality, because for a second I felt this immense guilt, like, why do I get to live this life, but she doesn't, And then I realized that me being there is representative of my entire community. Maybe we couldn't all make it there, but we all make it there through those that can. We all carry our communities with each other through our bones, through our hearts, in all of us, And so I decided, that, yeah, I will allow myself to have fun at UCLA the way that some of these rich students do as well, because I deserve that too. I deserve to live that life. I deserve to be happy as well. I've let this country take everything else from me. My youth is not something that I will let it take from me. Sort of to put that a little bit into perspective a little bit, as soon as I turned 18, my parents were like, "Jeffrey, let's get you married. Let's get you married. That's the way that you'll be able to get papers. That's the way that you'll be able to make it in. The papers aren't coming from Joe Biden or from Congress." And I was like, "You're right, they're not coming. But you know what? I don't want them from getting married either." Because, and I told them this all the time, I was like, I want to be young. I want to have a beautiful sweetheart in college that brings me flowers and chocolates, or I want to bring them flowers and chocolates. I want to sit on the steps at UCLA and fall in love completely and feel like, I'm chasing them around the library. And the only way we communicate for the first 5 weeks, because we're so nervous to talk to each other, is through library notes. I want that. I get to experience that myself. Why do I have to get married and give away my youth? When those processes to get citizenship through marriage, they're not only difficult, but they're invasive, and they force you to change your entire life, And so I refuse. I've given this country, like I said, I've given this country everything else. My youth, my ability to live life and experience joy, that's the one thing I get to hold on to. I refuse to give them that too. And I think that's how I've been part of that's how it connects to spirituality, because last quarter, actually, I took a class and it's called Brown Church, and it's all about liberation theology. I never thought that Christianity could be used like that. It was a spiritual awakening, to say the least. To be honest with you, I cried during lectures. It was, I stopped feeling like I was going to class. I was going to therapy. I was wholeheartedly going to therapy. And it was beautiful to see the way that, my professor was meshing the love of God with these ideas of social justice and liberation in ways that I was like, oh, you mean to tell me that God's love really is for everybody? And funny enough, at the close of that quarter comes along the church internship. Call that divine intervention, call that whatever you want to call it. But it was incredible. And I think I've been so much more cognizant of my own spirituality, my place in the universe, my understanding and conceptions and perceptions of what God is, what God's love is, what divine justice means. And so it's been beautiful.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I have a few other questions for you, but I think I'm going to save them for community sharing, because I see that we're approaching that part, and I know others want to have a chance to ask you questions or comment. Thank you so much. We'll talk some more in a few minutes.
Wow. It's hard to express, but what I keep thinking is I'm so moved, and I know the people in this church are moved as well with your story. So I want to sing a song. I don't think I've ever sang it before, but your story calls me to sing this. It's called Across the Borderline, written by Ry Cooder, John Hyatt, and Jim Dickinson. There's a place where I've been told every street is paved with gold, and it's just across the borderline. And when it's time to take your turn, Here's one lesson you must learn. You could lose more than you ever hope to find. When you reach the broken promised land and every dream slips through your hand, then you'll know it's too late to change your mind. 'Cause you've paid the price to come this far, just to wind up where you are, and you're still just across the borderline. Up and down the Rio Grande, 1,000 footprints in the sand reveal a secret that no one can define. The river flows on like a breath in between our life and death. Tell me who's the next to cross the borderline. En la triste oscuridad, hoy tenemos que cruzar este río que nos llama más allá. But hope remains when pride is gone, and it keeps you moving on, calling you across the borderline. When you reach the broken promised land and every dream slips through your hand, then you'll know it's too late to change your mind. 'Cause you paid the price to come this far, just to wind up where you are, and you're still just across the borderline. And you're still just across the borderline. Thank you, everybody.
What a song. Wonderful. Beautiful.
Thank you so much. Well, we have experienced some of the wisdom and missionary drive and spirit of enthusiasm and zest, and I can't describe it enough. I have really been very moved by Jeffrey's message to us today. And so we're going to have some questions and comments at this time. I saw that Jerry's hand was up first. Jerry? Ruben?
Well, thank you, and thank you so much, Jeffrey. Church in Ocean Park is really lucky to have you right now. And just hearing all this, I appreciate so much your integrity and your honesty. I know when we reinvigorate our activist support circle, which we had done for many years, kind of an emotional support group for progressive activists, we'd be honored if you would come and speak. And I'm glad you decided to have fun also, because I'm reminded of that slogan, if I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution. But I just want to say, you know, UCLA does have a better basketball team than Harvard or Yale. So, onward.
I appreciate that, Jerry. Yes, absolutely. I would love to come and speak. And yes, basketball is definitely better here. I mean, one of the reasons I also chose to come, what was I going to be at Harvard? A running H? At least here I can be a Bruin, you know?
Okay, Linda.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and bienvenido. I think it's because I have been the kind of upstander that doctor was for your mother. I have heard and been part of a lot of the same stories. I knew the chicken place in San Isidro where the coyotes hung out, actually, and have availed myself. Anyway, so I've never heard your story, but I certainly have a lot of friends from El Salvador that I've been part of their story. So it's good to, but I've never actually heard your mother's story. And I just want to reach out to that sister. And sometime I would like to hear your grandparents' stories. And I also want to say that I grew up in a church like yours and found liberation theology in the 60s. And so a lot of that, I felt that connection as well. What I would like to ask, however, is Bob's last question. What's your vision of a better world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm glad you've been part of those stories. I think, Linda, you speak really great. I will always emphasize that as much as immigrant organizing is about immigrants themselves stepping into their power, it is impossible for us to do it if we don't have the backing of allies who genuinely care and want to see us thrive. But as for my vision for a better world, I'm a communist at heart. I'm an abolitionist at heart. I think that's been part of the back and forth with my parents. You know, I think we were talking a few weeks ago about police abolition. And I told them about how I support the complete abolition of police and the complete restructuring of justice systems to be restorative rather than punitive. And, you know, I was talking to my mom about it, and I was like, Mami, tiene que haber una mejor forma de vivir, tiene que haber un mejor mundo, which translates to, Mom, there has to be a better way for us to live. There has to be a better world. My mom's response was a deadpan look into my eyes, and she said, are you sure that that's possible? And it was so disheartening and exhilarating at the same time. Disheartening because here was my mother who had gone through everything that she'd been through, and it had stolen the hope from her, you know? And that's what these systems do to us. They rob us of our hope, of our humanity, of our ability to be happy and experience joy, you know, because that's their entire purpose. Oppression works by silencing people. Oppression moves through us by being able to ensure that our stories never make it out, and that our stories don't become stories, but instead just stay as common life experiences. You know, that's just the way life is. You know, that's my mom's reaction a lot to sometimes police violence. That's just the way police are. No, that's not the way police are. That's the way the police have been made to be. You know, their system, their structure is set up to be that way, you know, or even when it comes to my parents' own understanding of immigration, you know, sometimes they're like, they see something going on and they're like, that's why Americans don't want us in their country, you know? And it's like, Mom, whose country? We sit on indigenous land, you know? And ideas of nation states only exist to keep people oppressed, you know? Nations, the creation of the idea of a nation state is where the idea of illegality comes up from, right? The idea that we're all these centralized people that have no connection to each other, you know, that we're all so vastly different from each other that we can't even come together, but we must actively fight each other and keep each other out. That only the people within our borders are eligible, are willing, and are worthy, and everybody else is the other, you know? And so for me, I see a world of abolition as my future, you know, and I know how ambitious that sounds, you know, but I also look at the way that the world is set up right now, and you can't tell me that any of it is sensical. None of it makes sense. So I get to be just as delusional in hoping for a world where people love each other. And if that's delusional, Jesus, I'd want to be insane the rest of my life, you know?
So I want to just say one more thing. Que no somos aliados, sino camaradas. And people in this church have heard me say that more than once. We are not allies. We are comrades in a common struggle.
Amen to that. Okay, Craig, I see your hand up.
Yeah, kind of sort of as a follow-up to what Linda was saying. I'm going to try and speak to the Latino community through you. Because I had heard recently, or not too recently, from a Latino woman, quite possibly my nephew's age, you know, approaching 40s and 50s. And she was scolding the Democratic Party by saying, "You're taking us for granted." Let me get to the background. The leading candidate for the Republican Party ticket has more than a 51% approval rating from that party. He is also on record as saying that he grabs women by the, privates, by the genitals. He kisses women when they don't expect to or, are asked to be kissed. He is being sued by a woman in New York for rape. He is in Georgia facing serious charges that could not just land him, but those folks in the Republican Party in Georgia in jail. Also, the New York district attorney has him on a short list. He is the leading, candidate for the Republican Party ticket. The alternative is Joe Biden. Now I'll get to my question. In your travels and in your experience at UCLA, do you see, I guess you could say, a thermometer that tends toward a third party that could address an agenda that suits all of us within those confines? Because at this point, when we look at what is available to us, that becomes the hope. And I'd love to hear, what it is you have to say about that.
Yeah, I love this question. I love this question specifically because it encapsulates my journey as a community organizer so well. When I came into UCLA, I came in with the desire to start getting involved in community organizing spaces, right? But I was completely bought into electoral politics. I thought Joe Biden was going to save me. I thought he was going to fly in and rescue me. Obviously he has not. He is now the president with the highest amount of deportations, even beating his own predecessor. Obama's administration ended up becoming named the deportation regime, right? This is now the deportation dictatorship, and I think it's very fitting, this question, because I've lost all faith in electoral politics, and specifically on the Democratic side. To the Republicans' credit, I know who they are. I know what they believe. I know what they want. With the Democrats, it's always a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? Biden ran on this promise of fortifying and protecting DACA, and somehow my application is frozen in USCIS right now, and I have no way of knowing if I'll ever be safe. So many broken promises from this administration. But besides that, I think it reveals the fact that it's the two-party system, one, obviously has not worked for so long, but at this rate, it's clearly like it's ineffectual altogether, And so, yes, I do see there being room for a third party, but honestly, I place a lot of the onus and impetus on my generation, and I think, to my generation's credit, for as much organizing and as much more involved as we may seem, there's also a really great sense of complacency. especially when it comes to electoral politics and this idea that we can't demand more or that we can't create something different. We stick ourselves to the same news outlets. I mean, someone that I've really loved to trace even since 2020 is Marianne Williamson. I think she does a great job at speaking to some of these like ills that are very prevalent. She has some of her flaws herself, but she's speaking about some of these issues in ways that Biden and Trump never will, especially Biden, even though he's seen as the left-wing candidate, right? And so all those ways that the media works, that we sort of allow our own information to get obfuscated, I think forces the system to continue to be alive. Like I keep hitting, the system is only alive because we don't challenge it. And so I do think there is a space for a third party. What I would love to see, though, is a third party that really takes these ideas of liberation, of intersectionality, of solidarity, and lives their values. Not just a party that's active at the election season, not just a party that's knocking on your door for a vote, but a party that's creating different ways of care. Why aren't we exploring mutual aid as a country a lot more broadly for parties? Political parties have such great reach and have such great fundraising capabilities. They alone could pull out so many people and support people to not have to face poverty, hunger. If parties are supposed to be sort of emulate the values that we want our country, our world to emulate, why aren't they doing that work themselves? Why are they only political machines that chase after your fundraising dollars and your votes? Why aren't they involved directly in the work of creating a better world, of putting their money where their mouth is, creating mutual aid funds? Why isn't the Democratic Party themselves paying for student loan forgiveness, offering that to their voters? Why aren't these parties doing a lot more around creating community centers to have oversight over policing, or to at least even create like a board to research restorative justice and how our current policies can be adapted to include abolitionist ideals, even a little bit just in the interim. Current parties are not doing the work to be able to put whatever it is that they want to do into practice, especially the Democratic Party. They fill their mouth talking about all these different values, and they fall short every single time because they don't know how to deliver on them. Because the fact of the matter is that most of them, if given the chance, will choose themselves over choosing everybody else. And I think that's the central problem with our parties right now. They're always cult of personalities, and it's always everyone for themselves under these guise of veiled, vague platitudes. They're not actually movers and shakers. They're not people doing the work. They're not people involved in community, and it shows. So I think that's what I would answer to that question.
Okay, well, very interesting discussion. I thought the thought came to me myself. I wonder, how is it that a third party leader has not emerged in all of this chaos that we have? I mean, when I look back and I remember Ross Perot and others who ran, very good third party, I wondered why. I thought this would have been a good opportunity for a third party to do even better than Ross Perot and others.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, Joseph. But I think actually that what you brought up proves why third parties have such a hard time coming up. Why was Ross Perot able to do it so successfully? Because he was a billionaire that was funding himself, right? Which means that the election system is set up for money.
Money.
So those third parties don't have that capacity, don't have those corporations and super PACs funding them. They can't break through the media waves. Even the requirements to get on primary debate stages, you have to poll at certain numbers, you have to fundraise at certain numbers, so it's all about capital and wealth, and so, yeah, I think even the system itself is not very slick in trying to hide who it is, and I think that's what has been so surprising to me as I've fallen out of this disillusionment with electoral politics. You start realizing that it's super clear and transparent what the realities are, what the purpose is, and what the goals are. And you start realizing that, you're like, oh, the only reason that they seemed good was because I was making them seem good, but the fallacies are there clearly.
Okay, well, we've had a great discussion. It is very important to hear our young people so involved and so educated and so motivated in all of that, all of the, what is happening in our country, in our world today. And so I will elongate the time a little bit more to let Bob God say a few words. And I see Rachel's hand is up too. Okay, Bob, and then Rachel, and we close there.
Okay, I'll give my time to Hurley Jim.
Oh, Hurley Jim is on?
Yeah.
Okay, Hurley.
Yeah, there's a lot I could say about this. I'm so glad you're here, Jeffrey, and I'm glad you're part of us. Yeah, we need you. And yeah, I'm not going to say it all, and I really appreciate that, Bob. The shortest way I can do this, and it may seem a little tangential, but it's not. Next Saturday is I'm going to be actually with a group of students up at Mono Lake celebrating World, Bird Migrant Celebration Day. And just think what, someday we are going to celebrate all migrants.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's definitely the dream for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Rachel Rose.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm on a new device. First off, I wrote an article for the Daily Costs a long time ago about third parties. And if we want a third party, then we actually have to create one. Running a third party candidate during presidential election season every 4 years is not going to get us to where we need to be if a third party is what you want. You have to run third party candidates in down ballot races, school boards, city councils, hell, even in the city of Los Angeles, neighborhood councils, whatever it takes. The other thing I'd like to address is the statements about the Democratic Party. I've been a member of the Stonewall Democratic Club for a very long time. I know people within the Democratic Party here in California who do walk the walk. Now, they don't necessarily do it through the party itself, but they are out there feeding the homeless. Susie Shannon would be one person that I know. Poverty Matters. There are plenty of Democrats out there walking the walk and doing great works, but not necessarily through the party apparatus itself. Mm-hmm. So let's give a little bit of slack to the people, and not lump the people in, particularly with the party itself. And the last thing I'd like to address is what I feel needs to happen, and Jeffrey, you may agree or disagree, but is the continued work that folks like yourself are doing, and the work that I have tried to do, which is to spread at a fundamental level the idea of universal peace and love. I think if we have that as our bedrock, if we have that as our foundation to build on, then I believe that we can be successful going into the future, but also realizing it's a marathon, not a sprint. This does not happen overnight. And we just need to keep pushing the system. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I agree. I mean, there's always good people in a bag of bad apples. I think for me, what I find a little bit hard to reconcile with is the fact that even those people doing great work in organizations like the Democratic Party still help to upkeep that apparatus of that party up, right? And yeah, I think to Lorraine's point, what I'd like to emphasize more is a reimagination of the system and the way that we organize and the way that we do our work. You know, I think sort of to your point, Rachel Rose, I think if we could all, you know, imagine a little bit more and actually put the work into running a third party or to doing a lot of those things, we could break away from having to feel like we have to engage with these apparatuses to not necessarily to do our work, but at least to, you know, also have another arena, another space. You know, I think one thing that I've seen a lot in my generation that I want to push back on is that idea that the gateway to advocacy is the Democratic Party. You know, I want people to realize that a lot of the change that happens will never go through a political party. I'm such an advocate for community care systems, for grassroots organizing, for mutual aid networks, because honestly, the only people that ever take care of each other is when we take care of ourselves. You know, these parties, these corporations, these groups, somewhere along the line, they always end up taking a life of their own. They become almost this personified like third figure that we all create like a monolith, you know. But when we engage in systems of community care, of grassroots activism, it's a lot more personal. You know, you're engaging in advocacy, not because, you know, you want to support this, obviously you're supporting this grander vision, but because for you, it's I'm supporting my friend. I'm holding the hand of my friend who's right next to me. And by holding their hand, I'm uplifting everybody else that they represent. You know, I can only do so much. You know, it's a day at a time. And so a day at a time, I will help one person at a time. You know, and I think we have to have a revised understanding of our theory of change. I do agree that I think even for those ambitious plans about abolition, they don't start with, you know, declaring police dead tonight, you know, like, and saying that policing systems will never exist again, you know, but it starts by recentering our ideas at the very, like, for example, for police abolition, I think one of the very first steps is getting school resource officers outside of our campuses. You know, policing starts at the educational foundational level with children. You know, ideas of abolition are so incompatible with the way that our world works because from a young age, we're shown that these systems are the only way to structure your life, you know? And so I think that for me, a really big way around helping create a different world is investing in our children, you know, doing a lot more with community education around our children, political empowerment with them, because they're the ones who are inevitably going to lead the world of tomorrow, right? Like we're talking about now, maybe our time for abolition has passed, you know, but generations keep struggling, generations keep fighting. I think what I would want to end on today is we all have a role in ensuring that that fight keeps going on, you know, and I know that it can get hard, it can be tiring. There's some days where I wake up and I don't want to organize at all. It's exhausting work. I love every single moment of it, but it's also tiring to have to hit the streets and advocate for your own humanity every day. You know, I'm glad and I'm honored that I get to do it to support my community, but I dream and I hope of the day that no one has to anymore because we're all treated equitably, because we all access justice and because we can all share love to each other. You know, I want the idea of having a struggle to end, and I want the idea of us being able to rejoice to be the natural way of life and the only way that we understand coexisting with one another. So thank you, everyone. I really, really appreciate the chance to speak with you all today.
Thank you very much. We've had a very stimulating, I think one of our longest discussions at worship here. So we thank you very much, and we continue to give our support and encouragement to our very wise and motivating young people sharing with us. Thank you. Louise?
A quick little song before announcements. Step by step, the longest march can be won, many stones to form an arch, singly none, and by union what we will can be accomplished still. by step, the longest march can be won, can be won. Many stones to form an arch, singly none, and by union what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn a mill, singly none,
very rich and lovely service today. We give thanks to Jeffry Muñoz for, as a young person, stimulating our hearts and minds in such a wonderful way. We have a lot of hope in our young people today. So we thank you all, and we are going to now stretch out our hands, unmute. We all unmute. And then we stretch out our hands all around the undocumented persons and places and all the people struggling to survive. And we embrace them and we say together, 1, 2, 3, carry on.